My guest today is Wade Wells, a seasoned cybersecurity expert whose passion for technology was sparked at an early age. Growing up with a computer built from parts his dad found dumpster diving, Wade learned how to navigate MS-DOS before he could even spell Windows. His lifelong fascination with technology and rule bending led him naturally into the world of cybersecurity. Today, Wade hunts for evil within networks, reveling in the continuous pursuit of knowledge and the thrill of uncovering deeper insights. Join us as we dive into his journey, explore the challenges of threat hunting, and discuss how his work contributes to a greater cause in the cybersecurity industry. Thanks for being with us on the show today, Wade. It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I was very surprised with the invite, to tell you the truth. Not many people hit me up to be on blogs to be on stuff all the time, so it was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, well you look really interesting. I think I picked you up. You're speaking at a Wild West Hacking Fest.
Yes,
in the near future.
Yeah, I am keynoting Wild West Hacking Fest in October, second week of October. It's pretty cool. When I actually received the text, the email asking if I wanted to do it, I was actually on live stream, and I almost puked because I got so nervous so quickly. But yeah, I do a lot of stuff with Black Hills, so it's always really fun.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, I guess we skipped a step there to kick things off. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your company and what you do there?
Yeah. So my primary job is I work in the financial sector I'm a lead threat detection engineer, but I've also worked for a couple fintechs, power companies, MSPs, a little bit all over the place. Primarily only blue team, right? I read logs all day, so that's why my handle is wading through logs. I do have an LLC I run on the side where I use it for training and as well as consulting and a little bit on that side. So I do teach a cyber threat intelligence course for Anti-Siphon Training, which is a Black Hills company. And I'm good friends with all the people at Black Hills, but I don't work for them, actually. A lot of people usually think I do, so it makes sense. I try to do a lot. And I also I'm on the board for B-Side San Diego. I am down here. And I try to help out any way I can with the local community as much as I can. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the philanthropic idea of giving things back and doing things in the community. That's really great.
Definitely. Yeah. Honestly, it's more rewarding most of the time than writing the detections. It's helping out those people.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about San Diego is there's literally something to do every week, cybersecurity wise. So if you want to stay busy, you can. And I always promise my wife, I only do one cybersecurity thing a week at the most 1 week. But
before we jump into it, I'm really curious about part of your intro that I pulled off your LinkedIn profile there. Your dad created a computer dumpster diving for parts. I want to hear this story.
Yeah. So my dad is a known storyteller. So who knows how much of it's true, but I did go with him a lot to dumpster dive. So I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which is Los Angeles, right? And he used to dumpster dive and he knew all the best places. One of his top places to go was Beacons, which is a storage facility for a higher class individual usually. And we used to go there and look for computers, look for desks, all sorts of stuff. My dad to this day still has a desk that he got dumpster diving. But slowly but surely put enough parts together to build a PC. And I remember the first time he ever plugged it in, it actually lit up like a little city, right? It blew out, something shorted. And, but honestly, he gave me a huge head start with computers, him showing me around MS-DOS, learning how to do CD, playing Duke Nukem. I remember probably playing Duke Nukem a little too early, probably around first grade. But yeah, so I had to learn Windows to get into Windows. That was the key thing.
Oh, that's a great story. Great story. So I asked you on the show today to talk about cyber threat intelligence and detection engineering. Could you start by explaining the relationship there, like how those disciplines complement each other in a cybersecurity framework?
Yeah. The first one to really go after is cyber threat intelligence, right? So CTI. The big thing with it is it really augments any other focus that it attached to, right? So CTI is more of a a subset business within the business, right? You have customers and all your customers are internal. So when a CTI team is usually attached to a detection engineering team, or at least provide some type of resources, they're going to be giving them up-to-date information on what type of detections out there to be looking for. You name it. There's 4 primary types of threat intelligence, but which is, now I'm on the spot, strategic, technical, and operational.
Okay.
Yeah. So usually you're going to want more stuff that aligns to TTPs, right? What type of tactics they're using, maybe something new that's come out, or if there's a particular threat actor out there that you are, that would be going after your organization. So CTI is going to hopefully grab that information, massage it, curate it, and hand it off to you so you can easily create those detections. A lot of the times there's a lot of ebb and flow, and then CTI is actually going to Detection Engineering is going to tell CTI what detections we have to try to get better intel next. So a lot of augmenting, a lot of talking back and forth. Nowadays, since I'm more on the detection engineering side, I'm reading less security reports than when I was working on the CTI side, which is nice, but I still like really getting in there and understanding what's going on out in the world.
And is like curation a big part of that? Like you're trying to find intelligence that applies to the specific industry, and hey, we don't have to worry about this, but this looks like something we should be worried about.
Yeah, exactly. So not just a specific industry, but specifically to your network as well, right? So if you're working in fintech and you have Palo Altos, you're going to want to know any type of weird Palo Altos, and you want to know which fintech actors who would be attacking them, which is pretty much everybody. That's the bad part about fintech, would be particularly targeting them. So one of the key things I actually talk about in my CTI course is you need to have an excellent inventory right off the bat to understand your organization. And usually those are like software inventory and hardware inventory right off the bat. You name it, firewalls, what type of security software you're using, maybe what type of stuff other teams are using as well. In order, if there are vulnerabilities that do come out, you could easily pass it to the detection engineering team and they can build something quickly. Or, of course, pass it to other teams so they can patch and update.
Okay, so like in a very large organization, having that internal intelligence team is important because this information is so specific to the particular lay of the land, as it were, for the company's internal network.
Very much so. Usually with those teams too, they're going to be actually doing some threat actor profiling and understand what particular threat actors are going after you, or at least more likely to go after you, and try to understand what their tactics are in order to harden your network towards them. A while back, one of the big ransomware groups actually got their playbook leaked, right? And I actually read that whole thing and then started building out detections based around that playbook. And then if I could possibly implement preventions as well as detections based off of it. So you can go a little bit further. The CTI is really the driver, just allows me to focus on my actual detection engineering job rather than having to read the news all the time or looking at RSS feeds, LinkedIn, X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it.
So how is the CTI generated by this team used to enhance the detection capabilities? Can you discuss a specific type of intelligence, like what's most valuable for building effective detections?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard based on what type of resources you have in your network, right? So hopefully you have like the end all be all with like EDRs or endpoint detection response and an AV as well as email and stuff like that. You're also going to want to know what type of tech detections you already have in place. So when that CTI comes in, they can fill those gaps. So that's actually one thing that's pretty hard, is to know exactly all the detections you have across your entire network. Hopefully your detection engineering team has that and can provide that to CTI to better provide them better intel. Usually it just comes down to TTPs, right? That top of the pyramid of pain. You name it. Usually MITRE ATT&CK stuff is going to be great. If they can give me a MITRE ATT&CK ID, I can do a little bit more research. Sometimes I get Sigma alerts, which are a generic logging detection, so that you can convert them to a bunch of different security tools. From there, usually I will actually run the attack at the beginning of the day. Like CTI will give us a report, say, hey, here are the attacks, or here's the newest thing with the threat actors. I will try to actually run those attacks very early in the day. Then later in the day, I'll go back and try to detect them and see what's going on there. And if I can't actually detect them, if I can't run the attacks, I'll actually hand them off to the red team and see if they can do that type of stuff. Usually all this information is starting with CTI, right? Really, hopefully they have good intel. Usually there's going to be a lot of communication on priority intelligence requirements, like stuff you want it, and then as well as how you actually want it. Do you want to get it in a blog post? Do you want to get it in a Teams message or a ticket somewhere? All that type of stuff really comes down to what you want the most. So as the detection engineer, you're the customer, and you got to be telling CTI what you want and how you want it. It's a lot.
Very cool. Yeah. No, it is a lot. And yeah, we're huge fans of Sigma. We have the Community Rule Edition as an add-on in our marketplace.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's a great project. So when you talk about like, that's an interesting thing I haven't heard where, oh, I've got this new intelligence. I want to create a new detection. Does it exist already? Like how many rules or detection rules do we have in place? Just ballpark, like tens of thousands or?
Definitely depends on the organization, right? It's not just like how many rules and then how many people are actually curating those rules as well. Yeah. So one of the organizations I was at, we probably had around 700 rules and there was only 2 of us to do all of them. Right. And I was like, this is too many. Like you uploaded, we need to tune these. There's so much stuff going on. But then once it gets even more difficult is when you go cross tool. So you're going to have an email tool. Maybe that has detections. You're going to have your SIEM. You're going to have your EDR. Maybe you have a DLP tool too. I would say thousands is probably a decent statement for most very large organizations. And then there's certain strategies to that go into the tens of thousands of rules, right?
And do you use like internally, we'll use like GitHub to have that sort of audit history and change control pull request process in place. Is that common in the industry or is that sort of a
I would say that is very, very rare, right? So we're talking a little bit about like detection as code, right? Using a CI/CD pipeline in order to get your detections all together and understand the content pushing. I have only talked to people and then I've set it up myself about it. I have, out of all the organization I've been to, only one has had it, and it's one I built it at, right? But I honestly think that is a huge thing in the future that's going to be coming. I was actually standing up Sublime Security, if you know what that is. They're
we're huge
product.
Fans. Yeah,
dude, they're so cool.
We work with them on some stuff. We're actually in RSA. We're doing a drinks night with them.
I cannot preach more about their product, and I've only been looking at it for like a couple of days now. But they actually have a built-in part of their product that looks at a repo and pulls in the tools for you. Or pulls in those detections, right? And so they have that CI/CD pipeline built into their tool. I honestly think that is a huge part of the detection engineering future. And it's amazing. I know you guys have exactly this, very similar, something to that as well, right? Same thing, which is awesome. And I think it's something that no one really does and no one really thinks about. Just because like the dev world hasn't fully crossed over into security, at least a big part of it. Yeah. Also, it is kind of a headache to set up at the initial at the beginning, unless you have a tool that already provides that, which not many of them do.
But the payoff down the road is so huge.
It is so great. It is. There's nothing like searching in a repo and being like, do we have a detection for this? And using a keyword search and bam. Oh yeah, we have actually 7. Or handing off that repo to other teams. So CTI, then they know all the detections they have, or they can search for those. Or
looking at the history with comments like, oh, this got changed back in March because, the story's there.
We deployed X tool which now causes false positives. So we actually had to tune this process out of the entire thing. I think that is definitely the future of security, if anything. The other big one is, of course, there's kind of a buzzword is threat-informed defense, which those two things go hand in hand.
Are there ways that automation and machine learning can be leveraged to improve the efficiency of threat detection systems using CTI? Are there particular algorithms or models that you find effective for this? Yeah.
The automation part, right? We did touch a little bit with the detection as code stuff. I think that is once again a big part of it. Being able to manually change those alerts just by editing it in the repo is a big thing. As far as like CTI enabling detection, I don't know as much about that or how they would do it. There are, of course, your threat feeds and stuff like that. Usually CTI is in charge of pumping in IOCs into whatever security tool you have with a bunch of IPs, hashes, and that sort of thing. But those do cause a large amount of false positives. And usually those IOCs are very old, or at least by the time they got them, the threat actors, the threat actors IOCs actually burned. They're no longer using it. One thing I always preach is to use that as a historical reference. So don't just say, okay, am I talking to this right now? It's, have I talked to this in the past 30 days? like
Right.
as far back as you can to really understand if maybe you already are breached or you were breached type of deal. That would be a big thing. As far as AI goes, I am a huge proponent of ChatGPT and Copilot. I actually pay for both. And I have had it write me some awesome reports. So I practice writing a lot, but I am absolutely horrible at it. I have horrible grammar, horrible spelling. And so
it's slow, right?
It's rough. So I always go to ChatGPT I'll ask it a question, especially when I'm building out my detections nowadays too. I'm actually building out a full report on the detection and how it works. And I usually try to do a decent amount of technical context. And a lot of the times if I'm writing these, I'm writing them in in VS Code, and Copilot will actually pick it up and will autofill stuff for me, which is awesome, especially about like lol bins, right? Or certain processes that it will know pretty heavy from Windows environments. I'll use the same thing with ChatGPT. As far as like enriching stuff, I use a couple of different security bots, but not one that's in particularly better than the other. I have thought about like training one myself and just throwing all the reports in there and see what comes out. But I don't really like sway towards anything, but I am actually taking a training this month by Jason Haddix, who he's teaching this course called Red, Blue, Purple AI. And I'm really interested to see where that pushes me after that.
Oh, very cool. I know of one company called Salem Cyber, and I can't remember exactly the mechanism, but the idea is that they don't help reduce false positives, but they help you understand which detections you should pay attention to, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah, like this one's important. You should look at it. That's sort of how their model's built. They seem to be having a lot of success, so it's interesting.
No, I need to look into that then. That's pretty interesting. I've been using it just for more of like being able to pass knowledge more efficiently to someone that would read the detection rather than escalate it. And from what I hear, your company is either super scared of AI, right? Or is embracing it fully, probably to the max. Yeah. And I have seen more people super scared and like edging their toe in to try to understand how we're going to use this. And it's been fun so far. I know Sentinel-1 also came out with like a purple AI, but I don't know how good that is. So we'll see.
Yeah, I always get suspicious when the big folks come out with these magic solutions.
What is it really? Is it probably just like a wrapper of ChatGPT or something?
Can you, when you think back, is there any time where like CTI stop something really bad from happening, like where you got an IOC or a hash or something, put in a detection and bang, got a hit?
So I remember watching a SANS CTI thing. So Katie Nichols was the host, who's huge CTI in the CTI world. And she was talking about NL test, right? And NL test is, I can't even tell you precisely what NL test does. I remember it pretty much trusts like network trust and to see what network you're on. And so NL test, I think like /domains, and then it tells you the trust of the network. I had never seen that executable before. I'm like, that's weird. This was like probably 2018, and I was pretty interested in it. So I ran it. I'm like, yeah, here it is. Okay, this is what it looks like. And then I realized no one ever runs it in my network. There wasn't a single use of it. And I was actually really surprised because most recon stuff is pretty loud. So instead of actually building a detection for it, I built a prevention. I'm like, nothing will use NL test. And if it does, tell me and kill whatever is doing it. And literally like 3 days later, something jumped on the network and ran NL test. And it was a piece of malware. And we caught it like that. So just watching a webcast, right? Probably prevented an outbreak at least a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. That reminds me of the XZ util campaign that just almost went through, and it was the guy that discovered it. It was by accident, just sort of like
why are our connections just a little bit slower? I need to get really deep, dude. That one was so crazy. That talk about a fluke. Yeah. I want to know how much time was spent in order to like get that exploit in there, only to be found out that quickly.
right at the end. Yeah. And it also makes you think of what else is out there, right? Like,
oh, definitely.
There's so many widely used open source projects that like one guy who maybe has some credit card bills is having a hard time, and 50 50K. Yeah, I'll slip that in there.
They'll probably do it for less than that, man.
Yeah. All right. Are there KPIs, or like how do you measure success for your program? So you have this whole internal team doing CTI, and then your threat detection team. Like, it's really expensive. How do you guys show value to management or measure the success of your program?
Yeah. So each team definitely has their own KPIs, right, to really show. And then there's definitely some in the middle where CTI is trying to provide better information and probably at least trying to lead to more actionable items every time you give somebody intel, right? Is there a strategy change? Is there some type of technical change in a tool now from information that we provided? Or possibly did like the detection engineering team build like 7 detections off this one report we handed them? Mm-hmm. That is all something I would keep in mind, as well as those threat lists, right? If you're providing those threat lists, you kind of want to make sure they're not too bad, they're not firing too many false positives, and they're actually being used correctly. CTI is pretty vast though, so we could also go into like external factors, like are we actually looking for domains out there that are pretending to be us or any type of threat actor, right? Are we looking for leaks within our network? It can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. As far as detection engineering goes, one thing that I always, I'm in charge of that I watch is the false positive rate. How many alerts are actually being fired? How many of them are false positives, and what do we need to tune? And then you also kind of understand, okay, if this detection is never fired, is it good? Are we bad, or is it bad, right? Like, is it me or is it it? And usually that involves some type of testing. Usually detection engineering's main client is then some type of triage team who's actually doing those alerts. So you got to talk to them and understand what their pains are and really try to get into their shoes. A lot of the times, most detection engineers have actually worked at least a triage position before, so they understand the tortured souls of the security operations center.
Just like off the top, is there like a ratio of false positives to hits that makes sense to shoot for? I know, like in marketing, if like 2.5% people open your email or something, that's a good rate. Is there any kind of ratio like that?
That's a pretty good one. I'm sure. So I would say the golden ratios probably depend on like three distinct things. So there's going to be like a confidence score, right? How sure are you? How sure is this going to be a false positive or a true positive? And I usually use like a low, medium, high, a severity scored. Like if this were to go off, is it important, right? Like if it's just like that recon one, okay, that's at the very beginning of the attack kill chain. Technically, if it goes off, it's not that bad. Like we're catching them at the beginning. And then there's like a sensitivity score, like how special is this alert for our environment? Usually we're using a combination of those 3 to understand if the detection, if it's firing off too much, do we need to just get rid of the detection entirely and turn it off? Right. And if there's too many false positives, if it's untunable. And then the other big part of it to think about is if you are tuning stuff, you're going to be shrinking the possible detections of what it can detect, right?
The coverage.
The coverage. And that part is very important. I've had like special detections where all of a sudden it's like looking for Tomcat for doing things. And all of a sudden Tomcat is just doing false positives all the time, but it's directly looking at it. So I'm like, I have to figure out how to tune this. And it's not just like a process name. I have to use like special command lines, maybe a network connection, really, really dive into it. Usually if it's firing more than a couple times a day, it's bad. That's my overall idea. Yeah.
Yeah. In like, do you think behavioral detections are as important as CTI, if not more important?
Yeah. I definitely think that there is like behavioral models that are coming out, right? Where you don't necessarily build a detection based completely on one detection. So if NL test fires, alert, right? Maybe you would do a weight based scoring. So if NL test fires, who am I? And a net stat, okay, then alert, because all 3 of those together is a little bit more suspicious. I think that's very, very hard to do at most points in most organizations, but it's way more fruitful.
Okay, so if somebody's already in the cybersecurity space, working the help desk or a SOC analyst or something, and they want to move into this sort of area that intersects between CTI and detection engineering, what kind of skills should they be looking to build, and are there courses or things that you would recommend for them?
Yeah, A lot of the times you want to just like, of course, dive into Sigma. That would be my first big one. Try to understand what the rest of the world is doing in order to bring yourself up to their speed, right? I always say stand up a home lab, which is maybe a little bit costly, but it's not too bad. I actually have a decent beefy home lab that I run elk in. I actually just stood up elk because my Splunk license went out and I don't want to have to do it again. So understanding that, and then doing false positive, like understanding how the false positives are coming in, and understanding all that type of stuff. Actually trying to get hands on would be your best bet. And understanding a little bit of statistics is another good one. There's one particular book. So the Practical Threat Detection Engineering, a hands-on guide. Highly suggest this book. I've read it a couple times. I still read it and go back to it. I've tried to scope a whole security operations program with somebody else based on this book. It is hands down probably the best for threat detection engineering right now. Another good one is MITRE ATT&CK. Their training arm actually has a threat detection engineering course. It used to be free. I don't know if it is anymore, but it was definitely well worth it. I actually talk about it in my CTI course, and it's pretty good.
Oh, very cool. And I have an educational budget, which I buy lots of books with, so I'm going to put that on the list.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's it goes into more of the philosophical of threat detection engineering and not just so much the technical, which I always enjoy.
Philosophical approach, which I also love. Math was really hard for me until I realized you had to go back to like the very basic concepts and build up from there. And I feel like that philosophical approach really helped me excel.
Math is still really hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard for AI too. Actually, it's one of the things that has a hard time with.
One other good thing I always try to tell people is understanding like the biases within threat intel and detection engineering. Right? Usually, the stuff you're going to be hearing on the news, or at least with when most people are reporting, are going to be stuff that's eye catching and that's happening. So that's always something really to think about. Just because you're not hearing about little attacks or common attack vectors doesn't mean they don't happen. It just means usually they're not good news. And onto that level, I always recommend people to read Psychology of an Intelligence Analyst by Richard Heward. It's free on the CIA's website. I hand it out to people whenever I can. Great read. Besides it reading like a 1950s textbook. Otherwise, it's pretty eye-opening. I loved it.
Very cool. So looking at like technology, vendors are always coming out with solutions. Is there anything that you see in the pipeline? You know, we talked about detection as code. Is there any other kind of innovations that you see in either CTI or detection engineering that are worth kind of keeping an eye on?
I think what we talked about with Sublime is going to be a big one, especially with you guys. Yeah, detection as code and CI/CD. I think AI is going to play a huge role in both knowledge transfer and as well as being able to attain knowledge quickly, at least enough to do an alert when it comes in. So far, what I've seen when just passing it some parameters or asking it a question, most of the time it does provide you with at least a decent answer. I trust AI as much as I trust the internet. So don't believe everything you read and try to always find second source of information, and that's usually what I'm doing. As far as that, I don't know much else that's really going on. Honestly, I've been kind of heads down in the tech world a little bit and not really looking around as far as vendors go or anything like that. So I would be interested. I was offered to go to RSA this year, and I decided to go to SANS instead. I'm doing SANS work study. So I probably should have went to RSA.
Yeah, I'm going for a couple days. It'll be interesting. It's always a bit of a zoo.
Now it makes me more disappointed that I didn't get to go to RSA. I should have just picked that.
Yeah. Well, there's always next year. Yeah. That's the thing, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is the last one I have for you. It's the one I ask of everybody that comes on the show. It can be as wide or as narrow as you want. Do you have any predictions for the future of cybersecurity?
Man, that is wide and narrow, right? I don't predict AI will take over. AI will not take over. AI will augment us, right? It's definitely going to be harder for people to get those entry-level jobs, especially with AI coming. The one thing I think I don't think enough effort is put into knowledge passing, if that makes sense. Being able to tell someone exactly what a detection is and what it's there for and how it detected is, I don't believe that's really matured almost anywhere. Detections code helps that a lot because it gives you a little bit more wiggle room, but it's really hard. And it's, but I think AI will actually improve that. So if you augment a brand new hire in a SOC with AI, and it's an AI built upon cybersecurity frameworks, right? It would pretty much advance him, I would think, pretty quickly. The other thing is leaning more towards the dev world, as we talked about once again, like the detection as code stuff, right? I think that is definitely going to be a big role, and that's something that we're going to need to do. I'm kind of interested to see, this is totally going off on another, like quantum computing. I really want to see stuff go off on that eventually, but I have no clue what's going to happen. I like dabble in that and read all the newest reports and stuff like that. And then, but have no science background in it. So I'm interested to see what that's going to lead to in the future as well.
Yeah, I find that one really fascinating too, because it seems like science fiction, it basically, it examines all permutations at the same time and then just recursively returns on the one that's correct.
Right? Like it's totally crazy, like sci-fi level stuff. Did you like it? Yeah. It totally gets me thinking about the TV show Devs. If you watched that,
I haven't. I might put it on the list.
Throw it on. It's quantum computing and it's kind of more philosophical, mind-breaking stuff. I don't want to ruin it for you. I went in not knowing anything about it, so
yeah. I'll link it in the show notes. I always fill up the show notes with links for everything we talk about.
Awesome.
So that'll be a cool one to check out. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it might be one of those things where it like seems super distant in this thing that's theoretical. And then all of a sudden, bang, it's going to be here just like AI was in the last year.
I said this in another podcast as a joke, but like everyone talks about quantum computing is going to break all encryption and stuff like that. But no one really talks about how quantum computing, if we don't solve the encryption problem, it's also going to break ransomware. Like we can't get ransomed anymore. So double-edged sword a little bit, but
yeah. Oh, that's an interesting take. Cool, man. Thanks so much for being on the show. This was a really fun one, Wade. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to see you somewhere in the real world one day and maybe have you back on the show.
Super appreciate it. I'll be back on anytime you want. Just hit me up.
Okay. Sweet, cool. Man. Take care.